Welcome back, guys. So React.js is a popular JavaScript library that is used for building user interfaces for web applications, right? So it was developed by Facebook originally, now maintained by Facebook as well, and a community of individual developers as well as companies. So at its core, React.js is all about creating reusable user interface components, right? So these components, think of these like building blocks that can be combined together simply to create complex user interfaces. That's how React UI works, right? So React.js works because it's just building blocks, and you take those blocks, you use them as you please, and depending on your project and scope requirements, right? So each component represents a part of the user interface and can have its own logic and state. One of the key features of React.js is its virtual document object model, also known as the DOM, right? So the virtual DOM is a lightweight copy of the actual DOM, which is a tree-like structure that represents the HTML elements of a web page. So React.js uses the virtual DOM to efficiently update the actual DOM only when necessary, which simply improves two things, right? First, it improves the performance, and of course makes the user interface more responsive. That's why when you see websites using React.js, for example, or apps using React.js, they're very, very responsive. So everything happens instantaneously. And that's the benefits of using React.js, which is, or the React DOM, right? Which is the tree-like structure. All right, so when a React component's state or props change, React.js will re-render the component and update the virtual DOM. And that's really the functionality of how React.js and the most powerful element of React.js, right? So once again, it will re-render the component and update the virtual DOM. Now what happens is it then compares the updated virtual DOM with the previous versions to identify the minimum number of changes needed to update the actual DOM. So you see what's happening? It's actually minimizing the steps, so it doesn't have to go back all the way and then display the entire app or web page again, for example. It only looks at the changes and then gives you the changes. Now this approach is known as diffing, right? Which allows React.js to update only the necessary parts of the user interface, resulting in faster and more efficient rendering. And that's the beauty of it, right? All right, another important concept to understand in React.js before we actually get into the hands-on and then start creating the app itself. The important concept in React.js is the concept of unidirectional data flow. So what that means is in React.js, data flows in a single direction. Flow, right? That kind of makes sense. From parent components to child components. So this makes it easier to understand and manage the state of application, as changes in the state of a parent component will automatically propagate to its child components, right? Sort of dependency, right? So from top to bottom hierarchical approach, from parent to child. And that's how the unidirectional data flow works. So React.js also provides a declarative syntax. Now, this is helpful for defining user interfaces. Instead of manually manipulating the DOM, developers can simply describe how the user interface, for example, should look like based on the current state and the props of the components. So React.js takes care of updating the actual DOM to reflect the desired state. So now let's take a look at some of the benefits of using React.js. Number one that comes to mind is the reusability, and I think I mentioned briefly earlier. Now, React.js promotes the creation of reusable UI components, which can be used across different parts of the application. Now, this makes it easier to maintain and update the user interface, as changes made to a component will automatically propagate to all instances of that component. Second important benefit is the performance. So React.js virtual DOM and diffing algorithm allow for efficient updates to the user interface. So by only updating the necessary parts of the DOM, React.js minimizes the amount of work needed to keep the user interface in sync with the application state, and of course resulting in better performance. Number three, the most important, I guess, the third benefit or the important aspect of React.js is its component-based architecture. So React.js encourages a modular and component-based approach to building user interfaces. Now this makes it easier to understand and manage the code base, as each component can be developed and tested independently. That can make sense, right? All right, next important concept and advantage or benefit is developer experience. Now React.js provides a simple and intuitive syntax for defining user interfaces. Its declarative nature allows developers to focus on describing what the user interface should look like, rather than worrying about how to manipulate the DOM. A large ecosystem is another benefit or important concept in React.js, because React.js has a large and active community of developers, so you can go around and find and get answers to your questions easily, because there are tons and tons of developers and active community behind you, right? So this also means that there are plenty of resources, libraries, and tools available to help with the development. Now this makes it easier to find solutions to common problems, like I mentioned earlier, and to stay up to date with the latest best practices. All right, so let's summarize. React.js, like I said, is a powerful JavaScript library for building user interfaces. This virtual DOM, unidirectional data flow, and components-based architecture makes it a popular choice among developers. Reusability, let's not forget that, right? Because of the focus on reusable elements or components, performance, and developer experience, React.js is a great tool for creating modern and responsive web applications. So I hope this helps. Just wanted to highlight the important aspects of React.js, what it is, how does it work, and why developers use and enjoy working with React.js, making it the powerful tool that you can use while developing web applications.